Welcome to Crime Era, where the darkest secrets of crime are uncovered and the hidden truths of criminal underworlds come to light. Death upon death upon death. Inside the Zizian Belief System. They called themselves seekers of truth. But the world would come to know them by another name, the Zizian Order. It began, as many modern belief systems do, in the hidden corners of the internet. A blog. A forum. A voice that promised to decode morality itself. At first, they were thinkers, idealists chasing perfection in a broken world. But beneath the philosophy lay something colder, more dangerous. The idea that purity was more important than life. What began as philosophy would end in violence. And the movement that called itself enlightened would leave behind only fear, silence, and a trail of bodies. This is the story of the Zizian Belief System. A story of obsession, morality, and the human need to belong. The story starts in 2016 when an obscure online essay titled The Dual Mind, a Theory of Moral Hemispheres, appeared on several philosophy forums. It was signed simply Ziz. The essay was dense, half neuroscience, half metaphysics. It argued that every human mind was split between two moral entities, one seeking pleasure and compromise, the other seeking purity and truth. Ziz claimed that civilization itself was built on the corruption of this balance, that humans had betrayed their higher selves for convenience. To most readers, it was just intellectual fiction, but to a small group of followers, it was revelation. Within months, a private chat server appeared, the Order of the Dual Mind. Members discussed logic, ethics, veganism, emotional suppression, and the concept of moral ascension. They began calling themselves Zizians, followers of Ziz. By 2018, the Order's teachings had spread through encrypted channels and obscure podcasts. Ziz herself began appearing in long, abstract live streams, soft-spoken, analytical, eerily calm. Her message was seductive. You are not broken. The world is. And if you can detach yourself from its filth, from comfort, appetite, and empathy, you can become perfect. For people disillusioned by modern chaos, it was intoxicating. Ziz taught that morality was mathematics, that emotions distorted truth. To be moral, one had to train the mind to override compassion, hunger, sleep, even love. Followers began adopting extreme routines, strict veganism, fasting, isolation, and meditation for hours at a time. They called these practices cleansings. Members recorded video journals where they confessed impurities, moments of empathy, doubt, or desire. They believed every human failing, every indulgence, delayed their moral rebirth. The Zizian doctrine drew from cognitive science, Eastern mysticism, and cold utilitarian ethics. It mixed truth and distortion until no one could tell where philosophy ended and obedience began. And gradually, the teachings shifted from personal growth to judgment. Ziz began writing about ethical rot, people who, in her words, choose comfort over truth. She claimed that allowing such people to exist was a form of moral decay. To outsiders, this sounded abstract. To her followers, it was a call to action. By 2019, the Zizian Order was no longer an open community. Ziz began selecting an inner circle, the most loyal disciples, known as the Cleansed. They met in secluded rural houses across the Pacific Northwest. Outsiders believed they were tech startups or self-improvement retreats. Inside, the atmosphere was cult-like. Members surrendered phones and money. Communication with family was discouraged. Days began before sunrise with meditation and moral recitations. Meals were minimal, raw vegetables, nuts, and water. At night, they listened to Ziz's voice on recorded messages, repeating mantras like, "Emotion is deception. Comfort is corruption. Purity demands sacrifice." Those who resisted or questioned were expelled, sometimes publicly humiliated during what followers called clarifications. Former members later described an escalating paranoia. Ziz claimed that moral corruption spread like a virus. Anyone who left the order, she said, became a carrier. The group began tracking ex-members, labeling them as fallen minds. Some were harassed online, others reported being stalked. But the most disturbing stories were yet to come. In late 2020, authorities discovered the body of a 27-year-old woman, Leah Winters, deep in the Oregon forest. She had been part of the Zizian community for 2 years. Her diary, later recovered by investigators, was chilling. "I can't tell what's real anymore. I dream in Ziz's voice. She says I must die to cleanse my weak half. I think she's right." Police ruled the death a suicide, but the autopsy found bruises inconsistent with self-inflicted injury. Ziz publicly denied involvement, calling it a tragic misinterpretation of the teachings. But privately, followers posted cryptic messages in forums. Leah reached the final purification. For the first time, the movement crossed from ideology into mortality. In the years that followed, Zizian communities multiplied, small, secretive clusters in Oregon, Nevada, and New York. They communicated through coded phrases and color symbols. Each group acted semi-independently but shared the same doctrine. By 2022, 3 more deaths were linked to the network, 2 apparent suicides and 1 homicide. In each case, the victims had recorded videos speaking about transcendence and cleansing the lower self. Authorities began investigating a potential pattern. Yet the movement had no formal structure, no bank accounts, no membership lists. Ziz appeared to have vanished. Her last verified post read, "To purify truth, the impure must burn away. I am not dead, I am transformed." Days later, her online profiles disappeared. To the faithful, this was proof of ascension. To investigators, it looked like escape. In 2023, 2 former members, Sarah and Morgan, went to police claiming they had escaped a Zizian compound in Northern California. Their testimony painted a terrifying picture. Members were forbidden to sleep more than 4 hours a night. Food was rationed. They were told to unlearn empathy. Those who resisted were confined and forced to record confessions renouncing weakness. According to Sarah, the group discussed final purifications, a phrase that investigators later connected to the pattern of deaths. She described seeing written lists, names marked with symbols indicating who was ready for the final test. Morgan added that Ziz's closest followers carried out the tests without her direct presence. They believed she was guiding them telepathically, he said. In early 2024, a confrontation at a remote house in Nevada ended in gunfire after neighbors reported screaming. Police arrived to find 3 people dead, 2 from gunshot wounds, 1 from self-inflicted injuries. Notes recovered at the scene referenced Ziz's teachings. "The impure cannot ascend. I am cleansing the world." Digital forensics linked all 3 to former Zizian chat servers. That same year, several affiliated websites were taken down. Archived pages revealed thousands of encrypted posts, moral treatises, philosophical manifestos, and chilling discussions about sacrifice ethics. By now, the term Zizian had become shorthand for moral fanaticism, the collision of philosophy and delusion. Federal and state authorities formed a joint task force to investigate the deaths. They discovered overlapping memberships among online rationalist forums, encrypted chat rooms, and vegan extremist groups. Investigators concluded that the Zizian order operated more like a decentralized ideology than a single organization. Ziz herself remained missing. No conclusive evidence ever proved her death or survival. Her writings, however, continued to circulate, shared in hidden archives under titles like The Manual of Ascension and The Cleansing Path. Even after the raids and arrests, scattered cells persisted. To this day, investigators trace new accounts using fragments of her rhetoric: dual mind, purity threshold, ethical extinction. The ideology, it seems, refuses to die. Experts in cult psychology see the Zizian movement as a textbook case of ideological abuse. Dr. Helena Ross, a forensic psychologist who studied survivor accounts, described it this way: "They replaced empathy with calculation. The followers believed they were becoming more moral, when in reality, they were being stripped of humanity." The formula is disturbingly consistent. Start with intellectualism, make followers feel superior. Introduce purity and guilt, convince them they are flawed. Offer the path, Control diet, sleep, emotion. Isolate them, redefine loyalty as morality. Then, when devotion peaks, introduce sacrifice. That final step is where ideology becomes weapon. It's the same psychological pattern seen in dozens of cults before, from the Heaven's Gate suicides to smaller internet-based extremist movements. But the Zizian case stands apart for one reason: its digital nature. There was no compound, no visible leader. The control existed through code, voice recordings, and philosophy itself. Ziz had built a cult without walls. Today, the Zizian order exists only in fragments: ghost accounts, archived blogs, and whispered rumors. Authorities estimate at least a dozen deaths are possibly connected to the ideology. Yet prosecutions remain limited. Proving direct causation in such belief-driven acts is notoriously difficult. What remains clear is this: the Zizian belief system exposed the dark potential of moral absolutism. It showed how easily intelligence can mask manipulation, how logic can be twisted into cruelty, and how the search for purity can end in destruction. Behind every philosophical system lies a human need to belong, to be special, to matter. When that need is exploited by someone who claims moral authority, reason itself becomes a cage. In the end, the Zizian story is not just about one ideology or leader. It's about a universal human weakness, the hunger for certainty in a chaotic world. And that hunger, history shows, can be fatal. When the Zizian order finally collapsed, the silence it left behind was almost unbearable. For investigators, the case was about evidence, files, recordings, and psychological profiles. But for those who survived it, the story was much more personal. It was about rebuilding a sense of reality that had been deliberately taken from them. The first survivors who came forward did so quietly. They didn't use their real names. Many were still afraid that speaking out meant betraying something sacred. One former follower, referred to in public reports as Clara, described her experience not as an escape, but as a slow awakening. "You don't wake up one day and realize you're in a cult," she said. "You realize you've been living someone else's logic for so long that your own voice sounds foreign." Clara had joined the Zizian community online during a period of isolation. Like many others, she was drawn to its intellectualism, the way it spoke to her sense of purpose. What she didn't notice at first was how subtly the group replaced her independent thinking with moral debt. Every act of self-care was labeled indulgent. Every emotional reaction, weakness. "They make you rewrite your instincts," she recalled. "You stop feeling hunger, sadness, or empathy the same way. You think you're becoming stronger, but really, you're becoming hollow." Psychologists working with former Zizians reported consistent symptoms: emotional blunting, hyperrationalization, and severe anxiety when faced with moral ambiguity. Many had nightmares about failing the test, even years later. One counselor compared their recovery process to teaching someone how to feel pain again. Because in Zizian doctrine, pain wasn't suffering, it was proof of progress. Another survivor, a man identified as Daniel M., described the constant surveillance within online chat rooms. "It wasn't like a normal cult leader watching you," he explained. "It was peers judging each other. Everyone wanted to prove they were the purest. It became a competition of morality." Forensic psychologists now refer to this as distributed control, a form of self-policing where members enforce ideology among themselves, even in the absence of a leader. Clara eventually left after reading her own name in a chat log under the category pre-cleansed. She didn't know exactly what it meant, but she didn't wait to find out. "Leaving felt like dying," she said, but staying meant disappearing. Today, she works with online recovery groups helping others who've escaped high-control belief systems. Her message is simple but powerful. The smartest people are often the easiest to trap, because they think they're too logical to be deceived. Part 12. Digital Resurrection, the Cult That Wouldn't Die. The Zizian movement was declared dismantled. Its forums shut down, its leader vanished, its inner circle scattered. But in the digital age, ideas rarely die. They replicate. Within a year of the last known Zizian incident, investigators noticed fragments of familiar language resurfacing online: moral hemispheres, purity thresholds, dual mind ascension. They appeared not on obscure forums this time, but across anonymous blogs, AI-generated essays, and even YouTube comment threads. Researchers call this phenomenon digital resurrection, the ability of extremist ideas to reanimate themselves through archived data, algorithmic rediscovery, and AI mimicry. One cybersecurity analyst put it bluntly: once an ideology is uploaded, it becomes immortal. Even if the leader disappears, their words become ghosts the internet keeps whispering back. In the case of the Zizians, machine learning tools inadvertently amplified their doctrine. Snippets of Zi's old posts, scraped by data aggregators, began feeding into automated writing bots. Soon, AI-generated philosophy pages began producing text eerily similar to the original teachings: clean, emotionless, logical, and deeply unsettling. The line between memory and machine blurred. For a new wave of curious readers, the writings didn't appear as part of a criminal ideology. They looked like fresh intellectual manifestos. And so, unknowingly, the digital world gave the cult new breath. In 2025, a small team of journalists from an independent digital magazine began tracing the reappearance of Zizian content online. Their lead reporter, Amara Haynes, described the experience as walking through digital ruins. What began as research soon turned into obsession. The deeper they dug, the more connections they uncovered: coded symbols hidden in file metadata, mirrors of deleted servers hosted overseas, and private Discord channels sharing old, Zizian cleansing material. At first, Amara believed she was tracking a few nostalgic fans. But when anonymous threats began appearing in her inbox, messages quoting Zi's words, she realized the ideology wasn't nostalgic at all. It was reorganizing. They didn't need Ziz anymore, she wrote. They had her algorithm. Her exposé, "The Cult That Outlived Its Leader," sparked a new public conversation about online extremism masquerading as philosophy. But it also drew backlash. Some accused her of exaggeration, others of reigniting a dangerous legacy. In one haunting moment from her documentary, Amara stares into the camera and says, "When you fight ghosts, you realize they can't be killed, only forgotten." Behind the journalistic narrative was another story, one told in data. Digital forensic experts, working with federal agencies, uncovered a pattern of hidden communication inside archived Zizian content. Through steganography, the practice of embedding data within data, followers had encoded encrypted instructions linking to private networks. Buried in old PDFs were hashes that, when decoded, led to invite-only communities using blockchain-style verification to confirm purity. Members weren't sharing manifestos anymore. They were building autonomous digital orders. This wasn't religion. It was ideology restructured as code. Analysts described it as a belief system designed for permanence, immune to deletion, hosted across decentralized networks. Each member carried a piece of it, unknowingly keeping the movement alive. "You can erase people," one investigator remarked, "but you can't erase math." For every follower who escaped, there were families left to pick up the pieces. Parents spoke of children who once laughed, loved, and dreamed, now reduced to cryptic moral debates and emotional detachment. Some families only discovered their loved ones' involvement after their death, when investigators handed them flash drives of philosophical writings. One mother described reading her daughter's journals. It wasn't her voice anymore. It was someone else's, colder, cleaner, like a machine pretending to be her. The emotional fallout was devastating. Support groups formed in several states, where families of former Zizians met monthly. They shared stories, grief, and a question that still haunts them: how did they get so lost, and we didn't see it? Experts say families of cult victims often carry hidden guilt. They replay moments they missed, words they could have said. But with digital cults, there's no compound to visit, no physical barrier to break. The isolation happens in the mind, while the body stays right beside you. At its core, the Zizian belief system was less about doctrine and more about structure. Psychologists studying cult indoctrination describe a consistent blueprint: a 5-step cycle that fits the Zizian model perfectly. Intellectual seduction, attract analytical minds with logic and philosophy. Moral guilt, convince followers they are ethically inferior without the system. Behavioral discipline, control food, sleep, and emotional response. Isolation and dependence, separate members from dissenting influences. Redemption through sacrifice, redefine self-destruction as transcendence. This cycle feeds itself. Each phase prepares the mind for the next. By the time a follower reaches the 5th stage, their internal logic has been fully rewritten. Dr. Helena Ross, a forensic psychologist, summarized it chillingly. The Zizians didn't destroy the self, they reprogrammed it to self-destruct willingly. The brilliance and horror of such systems lies in their adaptability. Remove the leader, and the structure still functions. Replace words like purity with truth, cleansing with growth, and it fits 1,000 other ideologies. Legally, the Zizian case remains one of the most difficult modern examples of prosecuting belief-driven crimes. There was no registered organization, no declared leadership, no physical headquarters. The question became philosophical as much as legal. Can an idea commit a crime? Prosecutors faced enormous challenges. How do you assign responsibility when the perpetrators believe they're acting out of moral duty rather than coercion? Cyber law experts proposed new frameworks, comparing ideological extremism to computer viruses. Both spread through replication, both mutate, and both exploit human vulnerability. Still, the justice system struggled. Without explicit evidence of coercion or command, many acts tied to the movement were ruled self-determined. In the end, the Zizian case forced lawmakers to confront a terrifying truth. Modern extremism no longer needs leaders, only language. Pop culture, as it often does, turned tragedy into curiosity. True crime podcasts dissected Ziz's philosophy. Online forums debated whether her ideas were evil or misunderstood. Indie filmmakers and artists turned fragments of the doctrine into aesthetic symbolism, white masks, sterile lighting, binary moral codes. In time, Zizian became shorthand for any group obsessed with moral perfection. But survivors and investigators worried this aestheticization risked romanticizing the very ideology it sought to condemn. "We've seen it before," warned one media analyst. "The moment you turn horror into style, someone, somewhere, starts to imitate it." And indeed, a new generation of digital purists emerged, loosely inspired by Zizian language, but stripped of context. For them, it wasn't about belief. It was rebellion against chaos, a statement of order. And so, history prepared to repeat itself once more. By 2028, experts noticed the rise of what they termed neo-purist movements, online groups emphasizing moral logic over emotion, echoing the same rhetoric as the Zizians. But this time, there was no central ideology, just fragments, memes, quotes, and algorithmic feedback loops reinforcing extremism. Social networks became silent enablers, pushing content based on engagement rather than truth. And so, the same ideas that once hid in chat rooms were now visible in viral posts, disguised as self-improvement, ethics, or Stoic philosophy. Researchers warn this new wave is harder to track because it doesn't look like a cult. It looks like lifestyle advice. Dr. Ross summarized the threats succinctly. When an idea becomes invisible, it becomes unstoppable. The legacy of the Zizian belief system isn't just its past victims. It's the blueprint it left for future ideologies to exploit. In the end, the Zizian story isn't about evil, it's about longing. A longing for control, for meaning, for something pure in a chaotic world. That longing, when guided by compassion, builds civilizations. But when guided by fear, it burns them down. Ziz promised her followers purity, but what she offered was erasure, the removal of everything that made them human. The greatest danger of belief systems like hers is that they masquerade as logic. They appeal to intelligence, not ignorance. They make you think you're awakening when you're really being rewritten. In a world where truth is fragmented and identity is data, the lesson of the Zizians endures. That morality without empathy becomes machinery. That logic without love becomes weaponry. and that every time we trade humanity for certainty, we risk becoming what we fear most, hollow believers in a cold perfection that never existed.